Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Today discussing our favorite picks, actually steals of the draft here. That's what we're doing. The steals, the biggest steals of the 2022 NFL draft. So Sam, let's get right to it. Which picks did you love and think were steals here in the draft?
Well, the single biggest steal of the entire draft is Nakobe Dean going to the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, I think this is true. Even if everything that was thrown out there on social media and on broadcasts during the draft is true, if his shoulder is in pieces and they have to piece it back together again from spare parts at the bottom of the hospital, it's still a steal. If he plays at all for the Eagles at this spot, he will dramatically outperform this draft spot. And if he is healthy, which, by the way, they claim he is, the Eagles are saying there's no problem. They expect him practicing in like a week. Wow. If that's true, like this is by far the best value of the draft, despite the fact that, you know, he's a linebacker and position value and all this kind of stuff. Like he has legitimate top 15 talent in this draft and slid all the way to the 19th pick of the third round.
Yeah, and like we were talking a little bit pre-draft that, you know, maybe some teams just had him as a third rounder, or maybe some teams just said, "Hey, he's too short for us. We didn't see him run. We'll just push him off the board." And that's when, like, if you could get that guy in the third round, he's still a first-round talent. I don't care what NFL team said. He is a first-round talent. Now, if he doesn't hit your measurables or there are maybe injury concern, whatever, absolutely that's worth a chance in the third round. I love it.
And by the way, one of the things that were sort of thrown at him as well, he only made plays because he had Jordan Davis in front of him and guys like that. Well, he still has Jordan Davis in front of him now, as it turns out, and he's got Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. So if that was true.
Those guys were also in front of Quay Walker, who went in the first round.
But if that was true, and he just needs big bodies in front of him to keep him clean, well, they're still there. So we should still see the Georgia Nakobe Dean like playing for the Eagles.
All right, we didn't chat ahead of time because I was going to go with my biggest steal, and by the way, it's from the Eagles as well. I think the biggest steal of the draft is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown. Does that count? He wasn't a draft pick, but hey, when you could take 18 overall and flip it for one of the top receivers in the NFL, yeah, you got to pay him. Yeah, you gave him the contract and all that stuff. But I don't think there's a better way to use a first-round pick than to get that guy on your team. A.J. Brown's the best wide receiver in this draft class. I'll say that. And now you got him locked up on your team. It's going to make last year's first-rounder Devontae Smith all the better. And the Eagles making some power moves because they had Jalen Hurts on that rookie contract. So I love it. I think A.J. Brown was an absolute steal because in hindsight, if I had anybody to pick with my first rounder, it's probably A.J. Brown in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this is a good wide receiver draft class, but there's no Jamar Chase. There's no like all-pro caliber, elite number one wide receiver in this group. A.J. Brown is, and the Eagles got him for a mid-first round pick. Okay, it cost them contract money as well, but yeah, in terms of talent, that was a player that simply didn't exist in this draft class if they were going after one. So if you want to frame it like that, it makes some sense.
I did. Thank you. Who else you got?
Let me stick with wide receiver though, because Sky Moore going to the Kansas City Chiefs with the 22nd pick of the second round. Jahan Dotson went with the 16th pick of the first round, and A, I think Sky Moore is a better player, and B, Sky Moore now gets to play with Patrick Mahomes. like even just in a vacuum, if you just told me that Sky Moore went with the 22nd pick of the second round, I would say, oh, that's a steal. He's going to dramatically outperform that draft slot. In a couple of years' time, we're going to be saying, you know, how did anybody let him fall that far? It was obvious he was a better player than that. Now you get to say, well, that's your baseline, and now you get to add Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, the Kansas City offense. Like Sky Moore, I think is potentially going to be an absolute star in that offense, and a mid-second round pick, low second round pick, that's an absolute steal.
Yeah, I love it. And the Chiefs also traded down and got him. The Patriots traded up and took a different receiver, Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor, a guy that we had more of as a day three or, you know, late day 2, day 3 type of pick. So I think the Chiefs really excited about Sky Moore. Basically 3 first-round values on the PFF board by the Chiefs in this entire draft. Right now, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription using the promo code NFLPOD. You get all of PFF's locked article content, fantasy football rankings and projections are coming soon, data and grades for the entire 2021 and upcoming 2022 season, and much more. Support the pod Use promo code NFLPod for 25% off any sub. I think, okay, is it receiver heavy, this entire theme? But it's George Pickens and your guy Calvin Austin, second and fourth round respectively for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think I just love it for the Steelers. I didn't necessarily love Kenny Pickett in the first, but man, they are putting the pieces around Kenny Pickett, and that's a receiving core that already has Deontay Johnson, already has Chase Claypool. I don't know if Chase Claypool is on his way out of town because they had, some ups and downs over the last couple of years, but I think that's a fantastic job by the Steelers taking the potential home run that is George Pickens, and then that speed threat that very just a unique, small but extremely explosive and fast receiver in Calvin Austin.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of an endorsement for both those players as well, right? Because if there's Pittsburgh as a team are very good at identifying wide receiver talent and developing it and getting success out of those guys. So, there are certain teams that seem to specialize at drafting certain positions and being above the baseline in terms of how those guys pan out. So there were a lot of people that didn't love George Pickens or had concerns about George Pickens. And, obviously Calvin Austin slipped a reasonable amount in the draft. So for Pittsburgh of all teams to be the team that grabs both those guys, I think is a pretty good thing or a good feather in their cap. And hopefully the Steelers are right, because I was a big fan of both those players, and they're on the same offense now. So that could be very fun.
You got anybody else here, Sam? Biggest steals?
I can't believe, it's all wide receivers right now, but I can't believe you ignored your guy out of Nebraska going to the Packers in the 7th round.
Oh, Samari?
Yeah.
Samari Toure going to the Packers in the 7th? That's
about
where he should have gone.
Their third wide receiver in the draft, but whatever.
Oh, Toure, I didn't love him. I just knew he needed to be in the top 50 or so. And, just missed on Toure. I have a couple second rounders I want to highlight.
Okay.
Arnold Ebiketie going to the Atlanta Falcons, and then my boy Jaquan Brisker going to the Bears. They didn't go at unexpected times in the draft. I think there's a lot of people that I trust and like that really thought Ebiketie was like a top 15, top 20 player in this draft. And I think, from a production standpoint, he's there. Unbelievable measurables. It is funny when you look at Ebiketie's measurables. If Trayvon Walker didn't exist in this draft, in this world, you might be talking about Ebiketie as like, he's right up there with Hutchinson, but without the arm length issues. So works out well, really productive. And I think for the Bears, even though you would have liked to see maybe some Justin Fields help with those first 2 picks, I think Jaquan Brisker is going to be excellent in that system and immediately contribute. So I liked those 2 particular second round picks.
The Chargers all the way down in the 6th round got Jamari Sawyer, the big offensive lineman, tackle in college, probably a guard at the next level. For him, that's possibly a starting guard for them. They obviously drafted Zion Johnson in the 1st round, but they might put both those guys at guard, kick Matt Filer out to tackle, where he's played in the past and has been pretty good, actually better than he had been at guard, at least for Pittsburgh before he moved over to the Chargers. They might have found like a starting caliber offensive lineman in the 6th round. I think that's an absolute steal. And then we have.
By the way, I think that's a theme though. I feel like a lot of teams have starting caliber guards in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. Like they've got some options that are going to be, could really pay dividends.
And then we need to at least mention the quarterbacks, because they all
that's where I was going to go
freaking far, right? And the one that I would highlight is Desmond Ridder, because I think Ridder is the most pro-ready of the group. Even though Kenny Pickett went in the 1st round, I think Ridder is the guy that could start soonest, and they don't need him to. So he can actually sit there, develop, see if they can work on his accuracy issues, and all of a sudden he could challenge Marcus Mariota for that job. I would, in a vacuum, love Malik Willis, as far as he slipped. But I actually think because Willis is such an unusual skill set, or not necessarily just a conventional plug and play type of player, the fact that he slid as far as he did almost harms his chances, because you're not building a custom offense for a 3rd round pick the way you would if he was a 1st rounder or maybe a 2nd rounder. So it is great value. I'm just not sure I would highlight it as much as a guy like Ridder, who doesn't need a new offense for him. Like he can just learn the Titans offense, or the Falcons offense rather. And when he's ready, he's ready.
Yeah, the thing with Willis, too, is you have Ryan Tannehill under contract for 2 more years, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's just stick him in this offense, let him develop his passing skills, and when and if it's time for Malik Willis to take over, you do have that offense crafted. I was going to highlight Sam Howell because he's all the way in the 5th round, so pressure's completely off of Sam Howell. But of all the guys, he showed so much potential as a freshman and as a sophomore. Didn't necessarily develop as a junior. And maybe there's a hit or miss history of true juniors coming out that aren't elite prospects. Maybe just the extra time for Sam Howell is going to do him well.
You look at Grinding the Mocks, that site by Benjamin Robinson, and if you go back, you only have to go back 7 months to find a consistent run of Sam Howell number 1 overall mock drafts. That guy's gone from number 1 overall to the 5th round in 7 months without breaking his neck or anything. Like, nothing happened to him. He just played football and didn't play tremendously badly, and all of a sudden he slips into the 5th round. You're right. Just from those terms, that has to be a steal.
All right, so we're going to talk about the draft all week pretty much on the big show, the PFF NFL podcast, and, of course, here on The Daily. Be sure to join us every single day. Let us know, what are your favorite steals of the draft? It's the PFF